Hey, it's Sherry. We're doing something a little different today. In August of 2022, we had a conversation with political scientist Rachel Bitecofer about her perfectly imperfect journey. Rachel has been a strong voice on saving our democracy, and her new book, Hit 'em Where It Hurts: How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game, was released yesterday. I'm super excited to read her book and also to attend her book event next week in Washington, D.C. Given how important her message is right now, Anne and I decided to re-release her episode. Enjoy the episode, and please check out her book.
Welcome to Flowing East and West, the perfectly imperfect journey to a fulfilled life. I'm Anne Roby, an HR advisor and consultant focused on building strong employee engagement and meaningful company culture.
And I'm Sherry Essig, an executive and life coach, and I work with people who are done settling for less than success and happiness. So, Anne, you know how excited I am about today because I have been babbling about it for a while. As you know, I am such a data geek and a political junkie, and I have this very curated Twitter list that I set up, 4 or 5 years ago. A few dozen people I follow for political analysis, mostly on the analytical side. And I call them my imaginary friends because I feel like I know them really well. They don't know I exist. And I'm super excited that one of my imaginary friends is like, yay, in real life on our podcast today.
IRL.
IRL. So we are joined today by Rachel Bitecofer, and she is a political scientist, a political branding strategist, a polling expert. I discovered Rachel when I read an article about her. I believe it was on slate.com, and she had almost perfectly predicted the 2018 national midterm results. I think it was like off by 1 seat. And
not bad.
Not bad. Really impressive. And I started following her on Twitter. And what I was so incredibly impressed with is how just scrappy she was and how much space she gave herself permission to take up. That world of forecasting and political data analysis is really male dominated.
Kind of a dude fest.
And I follow a lot of these people and I like their work. And I was appalled at the way they were pretty dismissive. And like I said, I was just really blown away by how she just held her own. She started gaining visibility. She's now had numerous appearances on news and commentary programs, 2 op-eds published in the New York Times, and was part of a hilariously funny skit on The Daily Show. So there's a lot more I can say, but I really want to leave most of our time for Rachel. So Rachel, we are so excited that you are joining us and would love for you to talk about your journey at a high level. We'll start there, just a wee bit about who you are, what your journey has looked like, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it's quite, I love the name of the show as soon as you guys reached out. And I thought, oh, how ironic. I'm sure you have many guests from a lot of places, but if you were to encapsulate like the personal biography aspect of my life, I guess you would call it Flowing East to West.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is perfect.
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? So yeah, I'm really happy to be here today to talk to you guys a little bit about, I appreciate the intro and that you've been with me since the beginning when I had to slog it out with Silver and those guys. Yeah, I would have told them, any of the dudes I did my PhD with should have warned these guys, like the one fucking thing you don't ever want to do is try to tell me I can't do shit. Because
a woman after my own heart.
No doubt.
Well, Rachel, where did that come from? Tell us a little bit about your journey and where some of that wanting to sort of push the envelope a little bit, where did all that come from?
Yeah, this is great. I don't do therapy. I do therapy in my truck with my music, So
well, you got it today, sister.
Shit, I haven't had a conversation about myself in a really long time. So I guess it'll be pretty cool. And, I think like there's a couple of like origin points for my tenacity. I think number one, a lot of it is just biological. Like I'm a walking, talking chromosomal contradiction. I've got all kinds of weird shit in my DNA that just makes me kind of weird.
Love it.
So I don't think I think that's a necessary but not sufficient condition. I grew up the youngest of two older brothers, one of whom I was extremely close to, was only 3 years older. And so I spent my entire life hanging out with dudes that were 3 years older than me, getting my ass kicked.
That'll do it.
By the time I was 8, I was impervious to physical pain, which set me up very nicely for a lifetime of chronic health issues. And I also had learned never to show weakness because in these boy crews that I would run with, and I spent a good chunk of my formative years kind of being a tomboy, hanging out with dudes, doing dude shit.
Yeah.
So I think that's some of it. You can't show weakness among men, which is sad. Like we socialize men that way, but it is definitely a product of trying to twice walk around a man's world as a woman, and I didn't realize too. I don't know. I'm the first. I hope the younger women hear this too. I'm the first generation post Roe. I was born in 1977. Okay. So I had literally, I grew up Navy brat, but we stabilized in Virginia and Maryland suburbs. Okay. And so my classes were, girls and boys and all kinds of racial diversity, and everything was shits and giggles, and you go in there. My parents were Reagan Republicans. I remember watching the 80 election, the 84 election, even though most people would never remember something like that.
Yeah, you were little when you were watching that then.
Yeah, I was kind of, like I said, a freak, right? So anyway, I go into my 5th grade segment on civil rights, right? I mean, this is a big fucking moment for me because everyone else is catching flies into their pencil sharpeners, but I was strangely interested. I was like, wait a minute. I just couldn't get over the fact she's on to the segment about MLK Jr., but I'm just sitting there having this epiphany moment at my desk watching the other kids catch flies. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute, it's 1986.
Right.
Are you telling me that in the 60s, you were alive, teacher, and Black people couldn't go into a fucking bathroom or a restaurant? That was an epiphany for me, okay? Because at that point, I think that's the moment where my weird DNA combined with the weird environment in which I was going to be living to make me question basically fucking everything, right?
Yeah.
And but at the same time, even though I started to learn about feminism a little bit in college, I would have, if I had never gone to a PhD, I would, and stayed in Eugene, Oregon, which is a liberal bubble in a liberal state. I had no fucking idea that sexism was so rampant still. And I wouldn't maybe know if I had never been, unless you're a woman that goes into a man's field or is challenging the corporate ladder or something like that. I guess, it's really when you fall into competition with these dudes that shit gets real,
That's right.
Yeah. And so, but that's because, I was born in 1977. So I only ever saw a desegregated world in which women had, until today at least, had equal rights under the law.
Right. Under the law, not always in practice, but
right.
yes.
Right. Under the law. Right.
Right. So here you are in grade school, having your eyes open to the fact the world hadn't always been like that. You're in the DC area. So how did you ultimately make your way from there to very liberal Eugene, Oregon, and a PhD? Because I don't think it was a straight line.
No, it definitely wasn't, right? Some of this is, I take full responsibility for my hoodlum fun in my youth, and absolutely have zero regrets about any of it, right? But at the end of the day, getting exposed to kids that were 3 years older than me, I ended up getting into the Grateful Dead,
Nice.
And traveling around the U.S. Jerry died pretty quick after I graduated out of high school. So right when I got full mobilic freedom is when that happened. And I discovered Eugene, on that circuit. And I was sitting there. I spent about a year actually investigating where I wanted to end up. And I remembered Eugene, and I was like, I'm going up there again. And oh man, I wasn't in the state, but 10 minutes when I was like, this is home.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. It was just such an incredible place. It's so incredibly beautiful out in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
The people are cool. The food is, everything's like fine. I'm a quality over quantity person.
Yeah.
So, fine cheese, fine wine, fine beer. Now you can get that shit everywhere. Okay.
Right.
But like back in the 90s, there was like a total desert dry place on the East Coast, especially for good beer and good quality food. Everything was kind of like the buffet level.
Right. Right.
Well,
Totally.
I have to say I moved from LA to DC in 1991, and my reaction was, where are the really yummy places to eat? And everything's super stuffy and traditional. So I totally hear what you're saying. And that's obviously changed dramatically now, but
oh my God, yes. Now at least, so when I had to look at moving to Georgia, which is, to do my PhD, I had pretty much one option to go and get funding and pursue my PhD, which I had to apply to as a single mom. I didn't go to college at all till I was 24. And then, I applied to my PhD programs, and I ended up getting into the University of Georgia with enough financial assistance for it to make sense to try. Especially being completely fucking ignorant of how higher ed worked and how hard the job market would be. So luckily I had imperfect information.
Sometimes having that imperfect information is actually what gets you what you
Oh my God, yes.
Right.
If anybody had told me, hey, Rachel, not only are you going to go live in the deep South for 6 years, okay, which is just like, it's culture shock, right? I mean, it's a sacrifice, but nobody said, hey, by the way, you'll never go home again, because if you can get a job, big if, as a professor, you'll have absolutely zero geographic flexibility. And I was very lucky because I ended up in coastal Virginia for 5 years after I finished. And now I'm home, and of course, in Oregon. But coastal Virginia, in terms of a regional straw to pick, is a pretty good pick,
Not too bad, So that was, you were teaching poli-sci, or what were you teaching? Yeah,
I came out of school at UGA and took the only appointment that I could get, which was a lecturer position. So it's not, it's tough out there, right?
Yeah.
And I was lucky. I mean, the market is just a brutal beast. Some people would never even get a phone call, dude.
Right.
That's crazy, But what really worked for me, and the reason we're having this conversation, I think, is I have a big carpe diem philosophy. So I managed to meet this guy, a fellow professor who was in the department but had been pulled out for administration. And his name was Quentin Kidd, and he ran the university had a donor funded little survey research lab. And I was like, well, I know you're super busy now being the big dean guy, and I have a lot of background in polling. I'd love to take that little thing and get it a permanent staff fixed in so we could do a lot of survey work and do these horse race surveys in Virginia. And so I really cut my teeth in the media and the electoral analysis stuff as a pollster at the Wasson Center, reporting out the results of these polls and giving analysis on Virginia politics. And it was, had this sitting Ferrari in the garage that no one was driving. I was like, well, shit, I'll take that. And hey, let's do tracking surveys, man. Let's make Wasson Center a big thing, and that's what I did. And it worked out really great for a long time, but it wasn't meant to be for me to stay there. So here I am.
Yeah. And so that was your first sort of taste of, I don't know what a tracking survey is. So
okay.
Can you explain that? And then that's your first sort of foray, I guess, into more of the analytics side of things.
Yeah. So it's good, in a general election, to get a base indicator. So say a poll right after Labor Day, because most people don't, normal people, which Normies. We are not. And that's why I call them in my book norms, right? The norms don't pay any attention to politics fucking ever, but the little bit that they do pay attention to politics happens after Labor Day, right? So you want to drop a first survey in the field right after that Labor Day holiday. And what that will give you is a baseline, right? So you can look for campaign effects. Now, in this era, and I don't want to get too technical, this is supposed to be about my other stuff, but in this era, the whole theory that I developed from other academic theories weaved together was that polarization, hyperpartisanship have made things not much more inelastic. So those tracking surveys that I ran, it was really interesting because the data was pretty much steady in every cycle that I ran there. Our data was pretty steady on the margin of win, and like the spread between the Republican and Democrats.
Hmm.
That's different than how the system used to be, guys. And that's because now things happen. And even though people probably do have legitimate criticism or not about, Trump's latest thing, they don't tell pollsters that. Like when pollsters ask, do you approve of President Trump? To them, there's a tribal role to play. And keeping that up. And that's why through his administration, his approval ratings are so stagnant. They have a very limited range. And even as a pandemic came in, and a pandemic's it can have a rally around the flag, good job effect, or it could have a, boy, you fucked this up effect, right? And you saw that in all the international data. So they the economists ran a survey where they put all the countries in, or all the democratic countries in, and measured public opinion on COVID management. And you can see the people that did really good getting these bumps, people who fucked it up, it was going down. Yep. Only one place, guys, has a once a century 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 body count crisis, and the public opinion stays completely stagnant the whole time, right? And that shit should never happen. So anyway, that's what polling was great for me, because I have this innovative predisposition to innovate on shit anyway. Yeah. And once I earned Quentin's trust and respect, because I was a new colleague and he gave me control of the surveys, I had a great time doing polling. Polling has a lot of value in it. It's just that we don't use them. Polls tell us about elections the only thing that they can tell us, whether they're going to be close or whether they're not.
Right.
And it's doing that, right? The polls are doing that. They've always done that. We're just asking them for a specificity they are statistically incapable of providing, because any competitive election is going to break down tops 3-point margin, right? Usually.
Right.
And so the polls margin of error is 3 points.
So you clearly have this huge affinity for data and for politics and for analyzing information. And you commented that, I'm just going to take you back in time a little bit, that you were a single mom, you didn't start college till you were 24. And so I'm really curious, what was the catharsis or the moment that you decided to go back to college or to pursue political science? I'm just really curious. What happened in between that period of time of, I'm a single mom, I'm not going to college, to, woohoo, I'm in a PhD program?
Yeah, I mean, I had my son when, and I think he was 2 or 3 when I enrolled in the community college for the first time. And I think what inspired me was boredom. Okay. So it had been fun to sit around and party all day and go to shows for a long time. And then it just stopped being fun,
Yeah.
I need something to do. And I had, a dead end job. It was actually a very nice job for somebody with no college education. I ran the HR department of this polling outfit. So I had an important job and more professional than most, non-college educated high school graduates would be able to finagle. But it was always going to be dead end in terms of the pay and the possibilities. And it wasn't mentally taxing. So anyway, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go try school, because when I was in high school, if I had ever gone to high school, I would have done great, that's why I was able to graduate on the half-ass homeschool, I have a real diploma, but I don't even remember, I didn't even meet the people in the senior class. So
I think it's safe to say you do not have the traditional background of your average PhD.
No. I've had way too much fun to even, you know what I mean? If an average PhD had even 1 ounce of the fun I've had, they'd all be cooler and happier people, So anyway, but then it happened quick, ladies. You'll like this shit. So I went to the community college, and I was a little nervous, to be honest with you. I didn't take the SATs, and I remembered being in honors and shit, but I hadn't been in an educational setting. I didn't know how I would react to it, but I found the work to be pretty easy. And, once I started to get going academically, one of the first classes I took was one on the course list for the general ed that said, intro to American government. I'm like, oh, I'm a nerd. I watched the news. I was always the only person at Grateful Dead lot reading the New York Times, I mean, I'd have my cigarette, my coffee, and my New York Times, right? I had a reputation for being weird. But anyway, I get in there and my professor, this great guy, his name is Steve Candy. Their height of the Bush administration, right? 2003, 2004, 2005, sometime around there. And Candy is in full what the fuck mode, and I just remember watching him being like, now that I could do as a job, okay? Like I could do that, be a professor. That would be cool. I love politics.
Interesting.
And then that's when I realized too that you could major in political science, right? I was like, well, I know what I'm doing, dude. And part of me was nervous, risk adverse as a single mom. And part of me considered doing HR business degree, right? And I could have certainly done that. And